Continuing this series' expanded look at what the Age of the Ring mod provides in its factions, both those original to AOTR and expanded ones from vanilla ROTWK, it's worth noting up front again that these videos are not guides, merely faction highlights so you can see at a glance what some of the more interesting changes are, or all new features are. Needless to say, this is not an exhaustive demonstration or compendium of changes. Something important to note up front, though. In this series, sometimes you'll see oddities like abilities and powers instantly refreshing, or resource structures that produce insanely high resources. This is just a product of the mod's testing mode, which lets you change these values in-game for testing purposes, or demonstration purposes as in this series. So these changes should not be seen as accurately representing the mod and how it actually plays. In the last episode, we covered in great detail Age of the Ring's Dwarves, a massive overhaul of Vanilla's faction. In this episode, we'll take a good look at AOTR's all-original faction of Haradwaith, which is centered on the mysterious lands of the south of Middle-earth. This alone makes this faction highly intriguing, as even in the books, very little was ever written about this wide area or its peoples. As a result, this is one of the most imaginative factions ever made for a BFME title or mod, since to fill it out properly, the developers had to make most of it from the ground up, from the individual stories of its original heroes to much of its units and spellbook powers. A good chunk of this is explored in the first episode of this series if you want to know more. Suffice to say, it has some of the widest range of units and stories to reflect the diversity of such a vast, unexplored area of Middle-earth. This runs the gamut from various tribes and warlords of Harondor, a region which lies on the borders of Gondor, to the formidable Corsair city of Umbar, full of pirates, with its vast ports ruled over by Gondor's arch-enemies, the Black Numenoreans, to lesser-known peoples of the deep south like the Mahuddin, people of the savannahs and deserts who have a close affinity to the Mumakil. Or the Nafarati, great huntsmen and warriors of the jungles out of Far Harad who have tamed many of its wild beasts. All of these and more are what constitute this great faction. Before jumping into the deep dive, as before, let's take a moment to appreciate the art of the faction, which is as diverse as you would expect. The art ranges from more Middle Eastern themes to Romanesque or Byzantine, and African combined with Mesoamerican, with some Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven thrown in for good measure. Units also have abundant individuality and personality, many times even having personalized attire, instead of having all the same faces and clothes as Vanilla's units do. As for banners, unlike the other factions, this one hardly has any. This is largely due to how much of it is tribal in nature. So the Mahudd don't really have banner carriers, but rather in Dunas, the tribesmen have their warlords, and the Corsairs have oaths sworn, etc. But the Harondor troops under Suladan have the Black Serpent banners. The men from Khand have a highly stylized one reflecting their different culture, and the Black Numenoreans have their own banners, with their leader Casimir having a variation on that design. All this reflects how so many peoples from far away have come for this war. Let's dive into the main stuff now, starting with the unique resource structure, the Bazaar. This is no ordinary farm or whatnot, but produces resources and recruits two unique units which transform into structures, the Southron Trade Caravan and the Amazir Caravan. The Trade Caravan is a group of traveling merchants selling their wares from across the east and south of Middle-earth. It unpacks wherever you want and produces resources like most other upgrade structures to level up. And, like a true caravan, it can be packed up and moved again as needed. More on this later in the video. Whereas the Amazir Caravan is a group of nomads who have camels with a fantastic new animation. These caravans operate like mobile wells and heroic statues combined. You can deploy them and pack them up as you see fit as well. More on these later in the video too. Looking at the Harondor outpost now, these are the troops from the war-torn region of Harondor just south of Gondor, ranging from nameless tribal warlords leading spam troops to more advanced troops under the command of your main warlord hero, Suladan. Haradwaith's basic units are the tribal warlords, who operate much like vanilla Angmar's Thrall Masters, so you can offer very deadly surprise attacks or defenses if the player is great at micromanagement on the fly, as he can adapt to any situation by summoning whatever he needs at that moment. However, these guys can be far deadlier because of the Lies and Threats upgrade, which increases the warlord's armor and the tribal unit's speed and damage, which can make for very devastating spam swarms around enemy bases. The Harondor units, on the other hand, are those directly under your warlord hero Suladan, comprised of spearmen, raiders, and archers. The Tier 2 Harondor spearmen have the great AOTR spear wall formation, but this time complete with their own marching animation. And the Harondor Raiders cavalry can change stance to allow for better trampling, a mechanic covered in more detail on the Gondor episode. The Tier 3 Harondor archers gain increased damage and firing range, the latter of which is a rare mechanic. One of the faction's several heroic units is the Guards of the Serpent. Veterans of war, these are Suladan's own personal guard. Limited to one on the battlefield, they can switch between their mounts and being on foot, doing excellent poison damage, which can stack with other sources of persistent damage, and can grant a great 100% armor buff against spears to Suladan, the Harondor cavalry, or the much more advanced Black Numenorean cavalry, all covered later. In a one-for-one scenario where cavalry and spearmen are relatively close in their tier level and upgrades, obviously cavalry are almost always going to be beaten by spearmen, even if you can outnumber spears 2 to 1 as here, no matter how many modifiers you stack on them, with one major exception in AOTR. More details on that in the Rohan episode though. So you have to be mindful of how you use Unbending Charge. Depending on how many spearmen there are, you can use it while your cavalry are standing still dealing melee damage, but the ability simply doesn't last long enough to make an impact. But you could also use it trampling the spearmen to get right up on them, typically as the last resort, like when trying to escape or when you need to punch through enemy ranks. Again, this is dependent on how many spearmen there are and where they stand in relation to your cavalry. And of course, your results will always be better the more modifiers you stack on them. Let's turn to the Mahudd outpost. A great design, by the way, made around the bones of fallen Mumakil, signifying the bond the Mahuddin have with them. There are swordsmen, ranged units, and a special support single unit, along with the Mumakil. The Mahudd units are somewhat more advanced Tier 1 units, the warriors being runners, so are quite fast for infantry units. They get a great 20% increase to damage for extra fast strikes against critical targets, like farms. And the headhunters have a unique weapon used nowhere else, blow darts. These are quite fast in terms of attack speed, and they use two different kinds of poison, one for damage and the other to stun enemy units. Then there's the Mahudd Chieftain, the fiercest warrior of the tribe. These guys have a passive spell which buffs out the armor and damage of Mahudd units whenever he attacks, and because it's a passive spell and not a leadership, it cannot be nullified or cancelled out, making chieftains invaluable against factions with lots of debuffs which cancel leadership, like Mordor or Dol Guldur. See my series on attribute modifiers for more details on how leaderships, spells, buffs, and debuffs all work. The chieftain's other ability is something of a bonus ability able to take over creep layers. Obviously, if you want to use this to the greatest effect possible, you gotta get the chieftains on the field ASAP before those layers are quickly destroyed. But if you manage to take them over and guard them well, they can supplement your troops quite nicely, adding to the already considerable map control the faction sports. The Umbarian citadel houses the infamous Corsairs of Umbar, the Black Numenorean swordsmen and cavalry, and the other heroic unit of the faction, the Watchers of Karna. The Corsairs are another great Tier 1 unit. In vanilla, they are a deadly swordsman unit from Mordor, being very fast and capable of switching between knives and firebombs. In Age of the Ring, they are even deadlier, as they have the same weapon swap but can now be buffed by a hero, Borodopan, and he grants the ability to steal resources with every kill. This hero will be covered in more detail later though. Suffice to say, the Corsairs are a great way to gain you much needed resources in the early game, but really in any stage of the game to afford the more expensive and deadly units the faction offers. The Black Numenoreans, though, are some of the toughest Tier 2 and 3 units, not just for the faction, but in the game. Arch-nemesis of Gondor dating back to the late Second Age, Gondor has had many clashes with them over the millennia, so their stats and abilities reflect this threat status. The swordsmen automatically debuff enemy armor by 10% as a passive ability, which is incredible for a non-heroic unit, and their level 3 ability debuffs enemy attack damage on top of it. And the Black Numenorean Vanguard Cavalry has the same passive debuff, but gets an incredible minus 50% trample deceleration, making them some of the most dangerous cavalry to take out clumps of units. See the episode on Gondor for more details on AOTR's trample deceleration mechanic. And the last unit available from the Umbarian Citadel is another heroic unit of the faction, the Watchers of Karna, guardians of an ancient temple harboring a mysterious evil deep in the jungles of Far Harad, and now protecting your hero Barodapan. They have a powerful formation that increases in stats as they level up, so you always want to keep them in this formation when in battle. They can also target enemies to buff themselves and gain 100% experience from kills near that target, making them some of the fastest heroic units in the game to level up. Their significant structure armor buff will be covered more a bit later, and they get to buff allies' speed and debuff enemy armor quite a bit, which can be stacked with the Black Numenoreans' passive debuff and other sources to melt enemies. The Pavilion of the Golden King mostly houses the many creatures of the faction. They range from predatory birds to giant scorpions and killer apes. More on these in a bit. But it also has one of AOTR's all-new type of unit, the semi-heroic unit. For this faction, the Nafarati Marauders. Limited to only 3 on the battlefield, they operate much like vanilla goblins, half-troll swordsmen, in that they cannot be trampled or knocked back by default. What makes them more formidable is that they can regain health per hit while also granting themselves a considerable self-buff to armor and damage. This naturally stacks with any buffs, spells, or leaderships you add to them. More on these units a bit later. The 3 creatures mentioned a moment ago feature quite heavily in the faction and can really shake up any strategy of your enemy. It's also frankly a ton of fun to see such a diverse range in play, and their Beastmaster unit supports them quite a bit with great buffs, lending high reward to the great skill required to use them. The vulture-like creatures called Carrion Feeders are fantastic support units to always have on hand to fly around your enemies and harass them from the skies. Capable of debuffing enemy armor, damage, and speed to keep them from escaping as easily, stack these debuffs with other debuffs like the Black Numenoreans to always have the advantage. All of this can be stacked with the poison damage of the Great Scorpions as well. These are the faction's early game siege units, which operate like advanced battering rams which level up for some potent attacks on enemy bases, capable of stealthing, dealing strong damage to structures while debuffing their armor, and being granted high armor against structure damage like arrow towers. Scorpions also aren't bad against swordsmen, just stay away from pikes and archers. The Harad patriarchs, giant apes of the far south stolen away by the Golden King, have now been grown and manipulated by him to be unrelenting killing machines of war. These creatures can make short work of enemy armies and bases, what with being very fast, having a howl ability to keep units from pursuing them to the death, knockback and splash damage, and a great leap ability dealing AoE damage in a wide radius. All of these creature units are buffed by the special support unit of the Nafarati Beastmasters. These guys are single units who can grant a strong armor buff to the creatures whilst buffing their damage in a unique way, through a powerful ranged strike. These creatures can deal increased damage to all enemies in the vicinity of that strike, and it even works on structures, especially making the Great Scorpions so much deadlier. And the Beastmasters can summon packs of jungle wargs, which partially ignore enemy armor, making them some of the fastest killers in the game when en masse. Put everything together and you've got a formidable creature feature army. As for the Mummikill themselves, whereas Vanilla had one kind, now there are two different kinds. The War Mummics, which are essentially the same as in Vanilla, but bigger, and the Siege Mummics, which have a giant catapult strapped to their backs. Siege never looked so good. Mummics can now buff one another too. And even buff nearby units and structure armor. What's more is they get upgrades to make them even more resistant to the enemy. Needless to say, these units are incredibly expensive, and they're upgrades. But the Mahuddin chieftains go a long way to making them cheaper, along with a fortress upgrade. All of this reflects how central these great beasts of the south are to the story of the Haradrim. In Vanilla, you cannot garrison archers in their howdahs, though they do come with some archers by default. In AOTR, they also come with default archers, but can now garrison whole battalions. More on this shortly. In vanilla, Mumakil are a siege unit for Mordor and are something of an oddity on the battlefield, though cool. But they can be somewhat quickly taken out by either spearmen or archers. They have been replaced by a different beast altogether in AOTR's Mordor, to be covered later in the series. You can see how much more effective they can be against pikemen in AOTR than in vanilla when given their upgrades and even just tier 1 tribal archers garrisoned in them. In both games, they're just as great at taking out heroes, though in different ways. In vanilla, depending on the hero, its level, etc., you could one-shot it, but cannot knock it over. In Age of the Ring, you can continuously knock them to the ground. So if you're intentional and have the opportunity, those heroes will not go anywhere as they slowly get trampled to death. In Age of the Ring, in addition to the great upgrades and buffs they get, for the normal mummics, now you get to garrison them with whatever units you want, not just archers, for some fairly incredible diversity of strategy. You can see here that the default warg sentries of the Beastmasters stay to protect the mummic. It's nice to have your heroes or heroic units protected, for instance, and then release them right in the middle of the enemy army. Many players will not see this coming. And the siege mummics are easily the best protected ranged siege in the game. Just stomp your enemies while advancing. They can even fire while moving. The only siege in all of BFME to do this, by the way. Quite incredible. There's even more on the overhaul to both varieties of these great beasts later in this video. The last structure to cover is the Sanctum of Zigor, which is essentially a temple of sacrifice for Sauron. In it are two special units, the Cultists of Zigor and the Hasharan Blades. The Cultists are of a priestly order and operate much like vanilla Angmar sorcerers. The Cultists deal light fire damage from range by default, and they come with two abilities essential for keeping enemy units and heroes from fleeing. These units can also specialize in one of several abilities at the structure. Zealotry lets them terrify enemies whilst buffing and healing your nearby troops. You can see the other cultists slowing down the enemy's movement speed and performing the knockback power, while I wait for the right moment to use the middle battalion's zealotry power. And you can see the zealotry power used here, with a great fiery effect showing many units are buffed. But you can also see some enemies are lighting on fire. The cultists have a subtle animation for their default fire damage, but it is relatively rapid, so they can be great support. But notice when I try to use the ability again to heal them that it does not work. It only works when enemies are nearby. Hearts of Fire lets them permanently upgrade melee troops with fire damage while increasing their armor against fire. making them strong against factions with fire era upgrades. You want to try to bunch up as many units as you can to maximize on this. And the most powerful ability in terms of raw power is the Spirit of Zigor. Each battalion with this upgrade can summon a massive blast of fire, dealing heavy persistent damage in a wide radius. Bring several battalions together for an unstoppable furnace, dealing max damage, torching everything in its path. And if you go in for the structure's nuke ability, you sacrifice all cultists on the field to summon forth the power of Sauron's master Melkor. The last unit to cover is the Hasharan Blades. Haradwaith as a faction has a ton of new features and content overall. One of the coolest is its forthright dedication to the stealth mechanic in one special unit, the Hasharan Blades, assassins in the service of one of your heroes, Ciar. This unit operates in many ways like a minigame within the faction, feeling like another hero added to the faction for all its new abilities, which takes a great deal of practice and skill to use. Hotkeys are crucial for the win here. One of the coolest features for these guys is that they have several stances that each provide a different ability not found in the other stances, all of which add to the complexity of the stealth of this unit. Easily the MVP of stealth in the whole game. I have a great video on my channel about these guys, by the way, if you want to see them in detail. These units can be used in conjunction with one of Harad's early game heroes, Ciar. The chief advisor to the faction leader, the Golden King, Ciar expands his leadership to nearly all non-creature units of the faction as he levels up, including the Hasharan Blades. He can also buff units and heroes, summon a couple Hasharan Blades to protect them, or debuff a target enemy hero and summon a couple blades to attack it. Baruthiel, concubine to Casimir and Barodapan, two of the faction's heroes, is an early game support hero who can permanently summon cats as spies on the battlefield. She can also debuff enemy units and provide temporary elite troops to supplement your army. Her debuffs, of course, can be stacked with other sources like the Black Numenoreans and Corsairs feeders, so she should be used at all stages of a match. Suladan, a fierce and seasoned warlord from the region of Harondor, buffs out Harondor Raider cavalry with his leadership when on horseback and the other Harondor units when on foot. He's an excellent hero killer, dealing heavy persistent damage which can be stacked with other sources like the poison of the Great Scorpion, Corsairs feeders, and Guards of the Serpent. And his passive speed debuff can be stacked with the Corsairs feeders to keep enemies from retreating. Barodapan, the Corsair Lord, naturally works best in conjunction with the Corsair strategy, appropriately buffing them with his leadership and enabling resource gain per kill with them. But even on his own, he does amazing damage to clumped units and even to structures, and he can permanently summon a unique structure, the Horn of Karna. This is more of a defensive weapon, so is best summoned in the protection of your base. Barodapan's fire can be combined with Suladan's structure armor debuff and others like it for incredible effect on clumped up buildings. Not a team up to be wasted by any means. And this is all in large part due to Age of the Ring's incredible overhaul of the fire mechanic, which you can check out in great detail on my channel here. The Horn of Karna causes enemy units to fight amongst themselves while summoning a creature to do heavy AoE damage. Perfect unit disruptor when you're being attacked at home. fun feature unique to Age of the Ring is that of the only hero naval vessel in the game, the Black Dread, which is Barodapon's flagship. Granting armor and damage to nearby ships, it also can summon a giant whirlpool to destroy everything in its vicinity, friend or foe, so be careful how it's used. Casimir, the Lord of Stones, leads the Black Numenoreans against Gondor, so naturally buffs them out with his leadership. And he looks incredible on his steed. He also grants a powerful spell buffing all units around him. His banner grants resistance to fear, terror, and knockback, so is perfect against factions with lots of creatures like Mordor or goblins. And his debuff stacks with other sources as always, like Baruthiel and the Carian feeders, etc. He can also briefly stun heroes while buffing his own armor, making him a formidable hero killer. Karan Lambar, one of the chieftains of the Nafarati people, is a mass destroyer who grants great buffs to himself while dealing out incredible splash damage. He can also buff out your Nafarati units like the Beastmasters and especially the Marauders. Stack his debuff with other sources as always while rocking out a sick helmet. And when his health gets low, he doles out a whopping 150% damage buff to himself while healing with every hit. But his most fun ability is to pull enemies toward himself while being able to trample for a time. He can make short work of everyone clustered together and prevent units and heroes from escaping, especially if he has the Marauders nearby. Combine it with his slam power for even better results. Finally, there's the faction leader, the Golden King. Leading the armies of Haradwaith, the Golden King debuffs enemies and removes leadership, much like the Witch King from Mordor. But he can also grant a significant 200% damage buff to allied units. And at level 10, the mask literally comes off as he is revealed to be one of the 9 ring wraiths. This ability grants him 50% damage, additional poison damage, and does persistent damage to surrounding enemies at all times. This power can also enable him to summon hordes of undead for 60 seconds. This is a nasty surprise as these units move fast and have fast attack speed, perfect for swarming your enemy when least suspecting it. A last note on heroes before moving on to the spellbook. Any of the faction's heroes can be permanently buffed by the fortress's unique ability, making Haradwaith have some of the toughest heroes of all factions. The spellbook for Haradwaith offers some interesting variety. Dry Spell is an early game power which disrupts enemy eco by a hefty 75% for 2.5 minutes. Combine this with CL Rule's economy disruption and Suladon's to really maximize on this eco disruption feature of the faction. March to War is quite a powerful one to cast, buffing all your units across the whole map simultaneously and making them completely immune to debuffs. Perfect when going up against factions like Mordor or Dol Guldur, which rely heavily upon debuffs. Curse of the Wind Demon may not seem like much on the outside, but consider that this is a stun power dealing decent damage in a wide radius, which can give you the edge in a battle and save your units and heroes in the nick of time from certain death. Not a power to be underestimated. Unrelenting Sun is a fantastic way to keep key enemy units from escaping, slowing them down by a hefty 33% while speeding up your own troops and doing persistent damage all the while so you can pursue fleeing units in style. A great power used in conjunction with the Karian feeders and Suladan's speed debuffs, and even the Wind Demon power. The Khandish Charioteers are essentially the legendary Wain Riders referenced in the books. These units act very much like Vanilla's Dwarven battle wagons, capable of running down clumps of non-spear units with ease. Modifiers can be stacked on them too for incredible results, especially when hunting down heroes. The faction's design and playstyle revolve around a good deal of micromanagement and mobility, some of which stem from some really unusual mechanics which make this faction stand out from the others even more than it already does. Enter map control. This is where the Amazir caravans, the trade caravans, the bazaars, and 3 more spellbook powers all come in. You have the Southron Sentry, a permanent early game summon which provides incredible line of sight and a little bit of resources. There's also the Tribes of Harad power, which summons a permanent tribal camp, which in turn can summon permanent reinforcements, all for free. Then there's the Oasis, which is another permanent summon, this time for both persistent and instant healing. One of the only opportunities in the faction to heal your units, this should be well protected. Even more so given it is the best source of healing for your Mumakil, a nice watering hole for these great beasts to regularly return to. Now let's put all this together. Haradwaith as a faction is largely about map control, from its early game hero Baruthiel's cats, to various permanent spellbook power summons, and the faction's caravans. For a skilled player, you can observe a great deal on the map whilst creating makeshift bases to reinforce your troops on the front lines, made all the better by armor buffs of the Mumakil and the Watchers of Karn. And to bring home the nomadic theme of the faction that much more, Haradwaith is the only faction forcing you to keep units nearby its upgrade structures if you want to invest in upgrades, so you have to keep those caravans on the move.
Swiftly, men of Umbar!
It's also the only faction to have such a structure portable and able to be repaired rather quickly to head back out onto the field. And the other portable structure, the Amazir caravans, are there to heal and buff out your troops for added protection, acting like portable heroic statues and wells combined. Meanwhile, the faction of Haradwaith centers around the Great Mumakil in their story, so it's only fitting that one of their top powers would be something called the Mumakil Matriarch, a giant mummic. This unique power brings to life the south of Middle-earth like never before in its detail and sheer scale. Notice the Beastmasters positioned on it, suggesting that this may come from the deep south. In terms of abilities, appropriately has a devastating stomp power which wrecks armies and bases. It can also use its natural trumpeting cry to stun nearby enemies and can gore target heroes or structures with its massive tusks. But to incentivize using Mumakil and keeping them alive, this summon actually buffs out any and all Mumakil for a truly devastating power that also feels incredibly cinematic and satisfying to pull off. Storytelling and gaming mechanics. As you've seen, Haradwaith is a unique faction with great diversity of strategy, offering countless strategic options to suit all kinds of needs, while also telling an interesting story to bring the mysterious lands of southern Middle-earth to life like nothing else in BFME. It's a truly one-of-a-kind accomplishment in the modding world. From its many original and compelling heroes like Karan Lambar, Casimir, and Borodapan, to the various peoples of the south like the Nafarati and the Mahuddin, and the many creatures tamed by them, all the way down to the simple nomads and trade caravans, Age of the Rings Haradwaith is not a faction to be missed by any devotee of the battle for Middle-earth. Well, this just about wraps up this video. In the next episode, we'll look in detail at the overhauled faction of Mordor, which is some of the most exciting features to bring the source material to life. Don't miss it. In the meantime, if you haven't already, why not download this amazing mod? It's fast, free, and easy. Download link is in the description, and I have a great installation guide on my channel here.